Flowering plants use sexual reproduction to produce seeds, which they keep in a fruit. But there's an incredible variety of plants, and some of them don't have flowers. How do they reproduce? What are some plants that don't have flowers? Moss, pine trees, and ferns. Mosses and ferns use spores to reproduce instead of seeds. Spores are also the result of sexual reproduction. What are some other organisms we've studied that use spores to reproduce? That would be fungus. Pine trees are not flowering plants either, even though they produce seeds. Pine trees and others like them, including firs, redwoods, sequoias, and even ginkgos, are called gymnosperms. Gymnosperm means naked seed. The pollen of a gymnosperm is spread by wind. Though gymnosperms produce pollen and eggs, fertilization occurs inside of a cone instead of a flower. Angiosperms have flowers and produce fruit. Gymnosperms have cones and do not produce fruit. Another thing is that not all plants need to reproduce sexually. What happened to these plants? The ivy and potato grew from existing plants. No pollen, no eggs, no seeds. They simply started to grow into a new plant, identical to the old plant. This is a form of asexual reproduction called the vegetative reproduction. Both the ivy and potato can also produce flowers, but don't need them in order to reproduce. The bulbs of daffodils and other similar plants are actually modified stems. Bulbs are another example of asexual reproduction. Flowering plants are the dominant kind of plant on Earth today, but they weren't in the first. In fact, when plants first made the move to land more than 450 million years ago, they were very simple. Primitive land plants used spores to reproduce, spreading them via water. Ferns evolved about 350 million years ago, and while they also used spores to reproduce, they grew larger than the first land plants. Seed plants, such as gymnosperms, did not appear until after 300 million years ago. Seed production is an adaptation that allows plants to complete their life cycles in relatively dry environments. They are not chained to water for reproduction as spore-producing plants are. Most gymnosperms rely upon wind for pollination. The first flowering plants originated over 135 million years ago. An interesting hypothesis is that they may have evolved much earlier than that, but because they evolved in dry areas where fossils are not easily formed, no fossils have been found from earlier than 135 million years ago. How did flowering plants become so successful? We'll explore that soon.